Some mornings I wake up convinced I'm invisible, like the exhaustion wrapped around my bones is a cloak no one else can see. Before dawn, I'm already moving, scrambling eggs, packing lunches, wrestling my 2 kids into coats and shoes, all while rehearsing tomorrow's lesson plans in my head. My name is Hannah Butler, 34 years old, an elementary school teacher and single mother of 2 beautiful, exhausting children. Every day is a relentless balancing act. Doctor appointments juggled between parent meetings, school projects coordinated without a partner's voice, bedtime stories told solo. There's no one to share the weight, no backup when I falter. Mason, my ex-husband, drifts in and out of their lives like a ghost, showing up when it suits him, usually weekends filled with promises of fun, and disappearing when responsibilities call. He doesn't see the late nights I spend helping with homework, or the silent tears I swallow when the bills pile up. But I carry a secret power, meticulous records of every exchange, every payment, every word. It's my shield against his disappearances and excuses, though he doesn't know I keep it. The tension hums in the background, a storm brewing not just between Mason and me, but fueled by his mother's looming interference, a threat I haven't yet fully faced. I am tired, yes, but I am far from defeated. This is my fight, not for me, but for my children, and I refuse to let anyone break us. I remember the moment things started to unravel, though back then I didn't know it was the beginning of a long, painful pattern. Early in our marriage, Mason was present, at least physically, attending birthdays, school plays. But one Thanksgiving, sitting around the table with his family, he promised to pay child support starting next month. That promise was like a lifeline, a hope I clung to as I tightened my belt and worked extra shifts. But month after month, the payments were late, then skipped altogether. "I'm broke," he'd say, while I sacrificed essentials to keep the household afloat, rationing groceries and missing doctor appointments so the kids wouldn't suffer. I told myself maybe he was struggling too. Maybe there was something invisible weighing him down like it did me. But every sporadic gift, an expensive toy, a new gadget, felt like a slap, a hollow attempt to mask his absence. His family, particularly his mother, didn't see my sacrifices. Instead, they accused me of pushing him away, of being controlling. They painted me as the villain, the one disrupting their perfect image. I swallowed the hurt, trying to keep peace for the kids. But deep down, I knew the quiet accommodations might one day break me. My sacrifices aren't small or quiet. They're the pounding heart of my everyday. I pay $1,800 a month in bills and child support, though Mason's court-ordered $400 is often a fantasy, arriving late or not at all. I've missed out on nights out with friends, declined a teaching fellowship that could have advanced my career, all to stay close to my children. My sister, Emily, is my lifeline. She watches the kids when I'm stuck at court dates, listens when my voice shakes, and reminds me I'm not alone in this fight. But then there's Mason's mother, Linda Clark, a constant, unwelcome presence who calls with unsolicited parenting advice that feels more like thinly veiled accusations. I keep my secret power close, a ledger with every dollar spent, every payment missed, every mean text from Linda saved like evidence. Despite my efforts, family court sessions feel like battles lost before they begin. The judge listens, but the scales often tip in Mason's favor, cloaked in claims of hardship. I smile and nod, but beneath that calm frustration simmers, and a quiet fire begins to burn. I'm no longer willing to be the silent victim. The first time Mason humiliated me in public, it happened at the local park during a custody exchange. I was watching the boys play when he sauntered in late, dressed in jeans and a designer jacket, the same man who claimed he couldn't afford child support. When I reminded him about the missed payments, his sneer was loud enough for bystanders to hear. "You're just turning the kids against me," he spat, the words sharp and cruel. The boys' faces fell, confusion and hurt mixing in their eyes. Then Linda appeared, slipping beside him like a shadow, her voice cutting through the air with venom. "You're overbearing," she accused me. "Selfish," neighbors whispered. I felt their eyes burning into my skin. The boys clung to me. Seeking comfort, I struggled to hold myself. I swallowed the sting, telling myself, they don't know the whole story. But as Mason and his mother laughed and walked away, I felt a seed of doubt take root inside me. Maybe my silence was no longer strength, but weakness. That day marked the end of my quiet endurance. I looked Mason in the eye and said calmly, "I'm done letting you make this about you." The war had begun, and I was ready to fight. The moment I pushed back, I knew Mason wouldn't take it lying down. The subtle shift was almost imperceptible at first. Text messages from mutual friends, vague messages hinting that I was unstable or manipulative. But then Linda's campaign kicked into full gear. She rallied a small army of flying monkeys, parents from the school, former friends, even some acquaintances coerced into questioning my parenting. I started receiving anonymous notes slipped into my mailbox, accusing me of being too emotional to care for the boys properly. The cruelest cut came when I found texts sent to my children, urging them to report on me, to spy on their own mother. My heart broke in 1,000 silent shards as I tried to explain to my 8-year-old that no grown-up should ask him to do that. Emily warned me that some of my allies were pulling back, afraid that aligning with me meant catching the backlash. Mason's social media was a parade of luxury, photos flaunting expensive watches, vacations I couldn't afford, and dinners out while his child support checks remained MIA. I kept fighting, quietly documenting every smear, every lie, every twisted word, but the weight pressed harder. This wasn't just neglect anymore. It was an attack designed to isolate me from the world I'd built for my children. The loneliness crept in, but so did my resolve. I wasn't going to be broken, not by them. In a rare moment of hope, I sought peace. I arranged a mediation session, convinced that facts would speak louder than games. I sat in that cold conference room, my voice steady as I laid out the truth. $5,200 in missed support, the emotional strain on my children, the harassment from Linda. Mason sat across from me, wearing a mask of cooperation, but I saw through it. His words were carefully crafted to twist the narrative, painting me as paranoid and controlling. Linda didn't need to speak. Her silence and smirk said enough. The mediator, trying to be neutral, dismissed my evidence and instead admonished me for escalating tensions. She suggested joint parenting classes as if that could fix the damage. I left that room feeling smaller, like I'd been punished for seeking justice. Mason and his mother left emboldened, their campaign unchecked. The exhaustion that had been simmering boiled over, but somewhere beneath it, a fierce flame ignited. Peace wasn't an option. If I wanted to protect my children, I'd have to fight harder, smarter. The system was failing us, but I wasn't failing them. The next blow was the most gutting yet. Mason's wedding, an event I wasn't invited to, but where the children were forced to go. I watched them leave that morning, their small hands clutching mine, eyes wide with confusion and dread. When they returned, their smiles had faded, replaced by whispered stories of scolding from Linda, accusations of misbehavior, and being told their mother was difficult. The images from the wedding circulated quickly. Mason and his new wife draped in designer wear, luxury cars gleaming, an opulent venue that screamed wealth while Mason claimed poverty to the court. At school, whispers spread like wildfire. Parents and even some teachers questioned the children's stability, blaming me for the chaos. Emily confronted one parent who was spreading rumors, reminding her, "These kids are caught in the middle of adult mess." But the damage was done. My reputation was unraveling, and with it, my standing at work. A promotion I'd worked years for was suddenly put on hold. The decision explained vaguely as concerns about personal circumstances. I felt the weight of their toxic control squeezing tighter. The humiliation, not just social but professional, cutting deep into the fragile ground I'd been trying to hold. The stakes had shifted. This was no longer just about money or visitation. It was about survival. Desperation pushed me to try one last time. I sent Mason and Linda a clear message. No more games. Stop contacting my children directly, I wrote, my fingers trembling, but my voice firm. Pay child support on time. We need family counseling for the boys. I waited, hoping for a sign they might choose peace, but Mason dismissed me with a cold, controlling label, while Linda's insults escalated, calling me a bitter ex who can't let go. Then the line was crossed. Linda sent a text to my son asking him to tell me what mom is hiding. The betrayal was raw and immediate. I could no longer pretend this was anything but a war. I told them both, I need you to respect my role as their mother. If this continues, I will take legal action. Silence met my words from Mason. Linda's harassment didn't stop. It intensified. The fragile thread of hope snapped. Mercy and patience weren't protecting my children or me. The fight had to change. I had to be louder, stronger, unbreakable. Because if I didn't, who would stand for the boys? Who would stand for me? The fallout was crushing. Mason's silence on the child support front stretched into months, each missed payment a fresh wound to my sense of stability. I sent reminders, pleas, even warnings about legal consequences, but they vanished into a void he refused to acknowledge. Meanwhile, Linda's harassment grew relentless. Her calls came at odd hours, her voice laced with venom thinly disguised as concern. At school, whispers followed me like shadows. Parents who once smiled now turned away, their opinions swayed by Mason's carefully crafted image. Even some of my acquaintances distanced themselves, afraid to get caught in the crossfire. I leaned heavily on Emily, my sister, whose steady presence was a lifeline in this storm. But inside, the doubt gnawed at me. Was I the problem? Was I failing my children? Despite every sacrifice, the school counselors hinted at family issues during parent-teacher conferences, suggesting support for the boys. But I felt the cold judgment in their eyes instead of compassion. Sleepless nights multiplied, and the weight of solitude pressed down. I found myself scrolling through Mason's social media. Luxury vacations, expensive gadgets, designer clothes, luxuries he claimed were impossible to afford, all while his child support checks remained MIA. The kids grew anxious, their innocent smiles tinged with confusion over the tension they sensed but couldn't understand. Financial strain tightened its grip, and the isolation wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. Yet somewhere beneath the exhaustion, a faint ember of determination flickered, waiting for a spark. The breaking point hit during a routine court hearing, but its impact was seismic. I sat stiffly, clutching a folder bursting with evidence, missed payments, harassing texts from Linda, and more. The judge's voice cut through the tense courtroom air as she read aloud some of Linda's most cruel messages, the ones sent directly to my 8-year-old son. The texts were brutal, calling me names, urging the child to spy on me, manipulating innocence for their twisted agenda. Mason and Linda denied everything, their faces masks of defiance, but the proof was undeniable. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the children's soft, confused whispers. I wrapped my arms around them, forcing calm through trembling limbs. Judge Caroline Ellis didn't hold back, reprimanding Mason for contempt and warning Linda to cease her harassment immediately. The arrogant facade Mason wore cracked visibly, his usual smirk replaced by stunned silence. Relief surged through me, mingling with a fierce sense of power. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about shielding my children's innocence from their destructive games. The legal system, which had often felt like an enemy, suddenly became a weapon in my hands. In that moment, I crossed a line from being a weary victim to a mother ready to fight with calculated intent. The battle was far from over, but I felt steel hardening within me. Alone in the quiet hours after the hearing, I lay awake, replaying years of betrayal and sacrifice in my mind. Every text from Mason's dismissive refusals, every missed payment, every cruel word from Linda echoed like a chorus of pain and frustration. But beneath the hurt, anger began to blaze, a raw, fierce fire fueled by the question that wouldn't let me rest. How could he abandon his own children so completely? I thought of Emily, her constant support a beacon in the darkness, and realized the strength I'd carried all along but never fully acknowledged. The pattern was clear now. The manipulation, the neglect, the lies spun to control and isolate me. Clarity sharpened my resolve, and I vowed silently, never again will I let them rewrite my family's story or diminish my worth. That vow was both a shield and a sword, born from pain, but forged in determination. I understood the emotional scars my children bore and the urgency of protecting not just their financial future, but their dignity and safety. This awakening wasn't easy. It was a raw reckoning, but it gave me a new kind of power. The fire inside me was no longer just survival. It was a promise of fierce protection and unyielding strength. The next morning, I shared my resolve with Emily over coffee, the warmth of the cup grounding me as I spoke. I laid out a plan, tentative at first, but growing clearer with each word. Gather every financial document, subpoena records of Mason's hidden income, file motions for contempt, and push for increased custody protections to shield the boys from further manipulation. Emily nodded, her eyes steady with unwavering support. She promised to stand by me at hearings, help with childcare, and keep the boys safe when I was swallowed by legal battles. Our conversation shifted my posture, from defensive exhaustion to strategic determination. I began organizing my files, highlighting missed payments, screenshots of Linda's texts, and Mason's lavish social media posts. I scheduled a meeting with a family law attorney, ready to turn my long-kept secret weapon, the truth, into undeniable evidence. Emily's words echoed in my mind. "You have the truth on your side. It's time they face it." That moment was a turning point. The emotional storm was settling, replaced by a clear-eyed, tactical focus. The fight ahead was daunting, but I was no longer just reacting. I was leading. The reckoning was near, and I would be ready. Sitting across from my attorney in that cramped conference room, I felt the weight of years of neglect and lies press down harder than ever. We had just gone through Mason's financial disclosures again, line by line, and something wasn't adding up. His declared income was barely enough to cover the most basic expenses, but his social media told a different story. Vacations in tropical resorts, dinners at upscale restaurants, snapshots of luxury cars. I fingered my phone, scrolling through screenshots I'd taken, heart pounding with a mix of frustration and hope. My lawyer nodded as she handed me a stack of documents from the forensic accountant they'd brought in. The accountant's report was a bombshell. Mason was funneling significant sums through his new wife's boutique business, masking his real earnings under the guise of business loans and personal transfers. It was a web of deception, but finally, I had the threads in my hands. As I sifted through the custody schedules, a new realization dawned. Mason depended on me far more than he let on. He showed up late, or not at all for pickups, relied on me for school transportation, and left me managing doctor appointments, field trips, and bedtime routines almost single-handedly. The system saw two parents, but I was the one holding the whole thing together. It was exhausting, but it was also leverage. I wasn't just the underdog. I was the axis everything revolved around. I organized Linda's harassment into a meticulous timeline. Every cruel text, every manipulative whisper cataloged like evidence. 47 messages alone, sent directly to my children, each one a calculated attack on my role as their mother. The truth I'd been carrying silently was now a weapon. For the first time, Mason's carefully crafted facade had cracks, and I could see the vulnerability beneath his bluster. I felt a spark of something fierce. Control, power, a secret strength born from years of endurance. This was my moment to shift the battle. They had underestimated me, and that was about to cost them. Despite the storm raging behind the scenes, I kept my daily life carefully balanced. Mornings began the same way. Pancakes for the boys, tie their shoes, backpacks packed with lunch and homework. At school, I smiled through parent conferences and lesson plans, hiding the tension knotting my stomach. I updated my ledger religiously, cross-referencing bank statements with child support records, and backed up every piece of evidence on encrypted drives. Passwords on our family accounts were changed, a small but necessary fortress against Mason's likely attempts to interfere. Emily and I spent late evenings rehearsing conversations I might have in court, practicing calm responses to Mason's provocations. The boys sensed the undercurrent of stress, but were cocooned in our rituals. Bedtime stories, Sunday park visits, silly jokes over dinner. Their laughter was my anchor, reminding me why the fight had to be relentless, but also carefully measured. Meanwhile, Mason flaunted a new luxury watch on Instagram, oblivious to the quiet storm building beneath his glossy posts. My silence was no weakness, it was strategy. I was sharpening my defenses, biding time until the perfect moment to strike, when every piece of evidence would land with undeniable force. This calm before the storm was critical, laying the groundwork for the upheaval I sensed coming. I was ready to be the storm. The day my attorney called with the discovery news, I was folding laundry in the dim kitchen light. Her voice trembled with urgency as she explained the tax filings. Mason's new wife's boutique, the $150,000 annual revenue, the hidden transfers disguised as loan repayments. I sank into the chair, breath catching in my throat. Every claim Mason made about being broke was a lie layered over more lies. The child support he owed wasn't a few $1,000s behind. It was a mountain of arrears that no longer fit the half-truths he'd spun. Tears blurred my vision as I shared the news with Emily later that evening. Relief washed over me like a wave, mixed with a fierce vindication. "Finally," I whispered, voice cracking. This evidence was more than just numbers. It was the key to dismantling the narrative Mason and Linda had built around us. My attorney immediately drafted motions demanding full back payments and stronger custody protections, turning the tide in ways I'd only dared to dream about. The legal battle was no longer a guessing game. It was a calculated strike with the truth as my sword. I could feel the ground shifting beneath me. Mason's lies were exposed in stark daylight, and the reckoning was no longer a threat, but an imminent reality. It was the breakthrough we had fought for, and I was ready to wield it. With the motion filed and court notifications sent, the first tremors of consequence rippled through Mason's carefully curated world. He remained oblivious, caught up in his luxury lifestyle, unaware that the law was closing in. I started blocking Linda's calls and texts, forcing her into court-mandated communication channels that limited her reach. The court issued a temporary injunction against her harassing messages, a small but significant victory that brought a sliver of peace to the boys. Mason received formal notice that his child support payments must reflect his true income, with arrears recalculated to $18,500. I watched as his social media posts became rarer, his usual carefree bravado giving way to guarded silence. It was subtle, but the cracks were there. I monitored every move with cautious optimism, knowing this was just the first phase of a long, grueling fight. The legal system, once a maze of frustration, was now a weapon in my arsenal, but it required patience and precision. The battle lines had been redrawn, and though Mason hadn't yet connected the dots, the first blows had landed. I was exhausted, yes, but more than that, I was unbreakable. The war was far from over, but I was no longer standing alone. I was standing for them, for my boys, with every ounce of strength I had left. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with expectation and the low murmur of whispered conversations. I sat at the table, hands steady despite the pounding of my heart. Mason's eyes were dull, shifting nervously from the judge to me, while Linda's lips curled in a smug, impatient smirk that barely masked the tension beneath. Judge Ellis called the session to order, her voice firm and commanding silence. As the judge began reading aloud from the transcripts of the 47 harassing texts Linda had sent, including some aimed directly at my son, I felt a cold fury rise inside me. The words were cruel, insidious attempts to poison my children's trust, to undermine my role as their mother, and now, in this room, they were laid bare for all to see. I took a deep breath and presented the financial evidence next. My voice was calm but unwavering as I detailed Mason's false claims of poverty. The documents revealed a trail of hidden income funneled through his wife's business, a web of lies he had spun so confidently on social media. The judge's eyes narrowed as she confronted Mason with the discrepancies, her questions sharp and unyielding. I saw the color drain from his face, the confident mask fractured under the weight of truth. Linda's facade crumbled too, her usual haughty posture replaced by anxious glances toward Mason. Emily's testimony was heartfelt and precise, describing the emotional toll the harassment had taken on the boys. A school counselor echoed those sentiments, recounting the children's anxiety and distress. The courtroom atmosphere shifted palpably. Power had reversed. I was no longer the weary, isolated mother on the defensive. I was a warrior armed with undeniable truth. The judge took a moment, then issued a contempt order against Mason for his non-compliance with support payments and forbade Linda any contact with the children. There was a warning, clear and final. Any violation could result in arrest. I looked at my boys, their wide eyes flickering with cautious hope, and my own face softened with relief mingled with steel resolve. This was the moment, the turning point I had fought for. The courtroom buzzed quietly with whispered affirmations, while Mason's world began to fracture before us all. My new boundaries were not mere lines in sand. They were walls built stone by stone with justice. The battle had shifted, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of victory settle over me like a quiet, fierce light. In the days that followed, the fallout was immediate and relentless. Mason frantically scrambled to reach me, his apologies dripping with insincerity, promises to make things right, falling hollow on my ears. He showered the boys with gifts, a desperate attempt to rewrite the narrative with material things, hoping to buy forgiveness and time. But I stood firm, shielded by the court orders and a legal team ready to enforce them. Linda's flying monkeys rallied, pressing friends and acquaintances to pressure me, but their efforts were met with unwavering resistance. Mason's attempts to dodge his financial obligations crumbled, wage garnishments kicked in, and legal oversight tightened like a noose. His social media, once a showcase of luxury and excess, faded into plaintive pleas for sympathy, ignored by most who saw through the charade. The banks and legal entities began to sift through his assets with fresh scrutiny, unraveling the threads of his deception. The distance between Mason and me grew wider, not just physically but emotionally. I enforced strict boundaries in our co-parenting, no longer tolerating his manipulations or absences. At home, the boys began to heal, their smiles less strained, buoyed by my steady presence and newfound strength. The legal reckoning rippled through Mason's carefully maintained facade, exposing the cracks beneath. His world, once so controlled and polished, began to crumble under the weight of accountability. For the first time, I saw him vulnerable, grasping in desperation at fading control. And through it all, I remained unyielding, a mother not just surviving but reclaiming her power, one firm step at a time. Mason's final attempts at manipulation grew more frantic, but by then, I was ready. His flying monkey campaigns intensified. False rumors of alienation and neglect spread like poison through our community. Threatening messages arrived at my workplace, darkening my professional life with baseless accusations. Linda escalated too, showing up uninvited at school events, trying to insert herself where she had no right. But I documented everything meticulously, every call, every encounter, every whispered threat. I moved swiftly, filing restraining orders and involving law enforcement whenever the line was crossed. Emily became a fortress around the boys, shielding them from the noise, offering comfort and stability amid the chaos. Mason's circle of influence shrank as his manipulative behavior became undeniable. The court reiterated sanctions and cautions, making it clear that violations would not be tolerated. I stood firm, unshaken, knowing these tactics were the last gasps of a man losing control. My defenses were fortified, built on evidence and legal protections. The isolation grew heavier around Mason and Linda, their attempts to fracture our family failing spectacularly. The truth was no longer just a weapon. It was a shield, making their attacks harmless as they faded into irrelevance. This final wave of manipulation crashed and broke on the rock of my resolve, and I stood tall, victorious, and unbroken. Now, with the legal battles behind me, I am stepping into a new chapter of peace and empowerment. The journey has been grueling, but the support of Emily and the fairness of Judge Ellis have been pillars I leaned on. Child support payments flow consistently now, reflecting Mason's true income and restoring a sense of financial security that had long eluded us. Custody arrangements prioritize the boys' well-being, with strict limits placed on Mason's and Linda's access, ensuring my children's emotional safety above all. My relationship with the boys has grown stronger, freed from the shadow of manipulation and neglect. At work, I've regained confidence, finally earning the promotion that had been withheld in the past, a quiet testament to my resilience. I've set clear boundaries with Mason's family, protecting my home and my children's peace. The boys, though carrying scars, are beginning to thrive with therapy and the unwavering love I give them every day. I feel a shift inside, a move from exhaustion and doubt to pride and hope. I fought not just for survival, but for justice, and I won. On a bright morning, walking my children to school, their small hands in mine, I feel the weight of all we've endured and the promise of a better future. The legal reckoning has brought balance, but more than that, it has forged me into a mother stronger than ever, ready to face whatever storms may come, fiercely protective and unbreakable.